All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, everybody. I believe most of you know me, but for those who don't, I'm Nina Marquise. I'm the director of the Office of Approved Special Education Schools at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So thank you for being here this morning. We're pleased to be able to walk you through these grant applications, which Matt and I will be reviewing in a second. First, I want to just share a little bit of background on how we got to where we are today. I first came to the department 23 years ago from an approved special education school. And I honestly don't remember an interagency collaboration like this, which certainly underscores the unprecedented times that we're in. This was a top-down effort with participation from the Governor's Office, the Executive Office of Education, the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, the Office of the Child Advocate, the Autism Commission, Administration and Finance, the Department of Early Education and Care, the Department of Children and Families, the Department of Mental Health, the Operational Services Division, and DESE. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody, but as you can see, there were a lot of agencies involved, and we're very appreciative of everyone's support and help. While there was universal agreement about the urgent need to get these resources out to the programs, we also needed to ensure the process complied with state and federal requirements, as well as to ensure we avoid any unintended consequences down the road for your programs. And we all believe that we have achieved this goal, so we are happy for that. So now I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who will introduce himself and begin his part of the presentation. So thank you.
All right, great. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Matt Denninger. Some of you probably remember me from the spring. I'm the Chief Strategy and Research Officer at DESE, and happy to be walking us through these two funding opportunities for approved special education schools. We're calling them EASES-II and EASSA-Workforce. And I'm going to walk through each of these in detail so that hopefully by the end of this, the goal will be that you all know what they are and how to apply for them, or what the guardrails are around each of these grant opportunities. So before we begin, I'm gonna send these slides out probably to Elizabeth and Maps, and we can send them out to everyone after today. We also have your registrations from today, so we could also use those emails. So if you get it twice, you know, they always say over communicate. As you see, we're recording this session. We know that there are probably some agencies out there that weren't able to make it today, so we'll have this as a recording. Please turn your microphone off, although you actually don't need to do that because we're in this webinar format. Actually, instead of using the chat feature at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A feature in the webinar format. That's actually much easier to use. So if you've got questions, please use the Q&A feature and not the chat feature. Oh, good. Live closed captioning has been enabled. So enabled. That's great. That's great. I know there was a request for that. Okay, so basically everything that I'm going to cover here is on our EASES website. And I actually just want to, because some of you might not have been there yet, I really just want you to see it for 2 seconds here so I can show you what's on it. So hold on 1 second. Let me bring up my Chrome. Hold on 1 second. I have it here. Okay, so this is the EASES website. It is newly updated. It will talk about both of these opportunities. One we're calling EASES Workforce and one we're calling EASES-II. Each of these programs has the notice of grant opportunity. The notice of the grant opportunity is where the whole grant is described, the purpose, the scope, how we arrived at the available funding, the eligibility criteria, the application requirements, the terms and conditions, etc. All of that is in the notice of the grant opportunity. And then there is allocations. Allocations have been posted here. So just click on the allocations and you see all the agencies and all the allocations. And then there are some instructions that, again, I'm going to go through all this, but in order to apply, you need to submit the following to the following email address. And there are 3 things for the EASES Workforce grant, and there are 2 things for the EASES-II grant. So just wanted to share that with you. If you hadn't seen the website, basically everything that you need is going to be on that website and is on that website now. All right, so back to the show. Okay, so 2 new programs for FY22. One of them is called EASES-II. Okay, EASES-II is almost exactly the same as EASES-I, and I'll walk through that. It is $20 million in state funds. EASES-II is state funding. Okay. The second one that we'll walk through in more depth is EASES Workforce. The purpose of it is to strengthen and stabilize the workforce, specifically for staff providing direct care education services or related services directly to students. And this is $79 million in federal funds. Okay, so EASES-II is state funds, EASES Workforce is federal funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. So I'm actually going to start with EASES-II first, because it's probably going to be the most familiar to you if you were involved just a few months ago with EASES-I. Again, it's about the same amount of money, $20 million in, again, state funding. We came up with each grant based on a 10% increase in the average cost per student for a total of 180 days. So from July 1 to December 31 of this year, based on the number of students the program has most been recently approved to serve by DESE. The purpose of it is very, very broad. Okay, it's really to address the continuing costs of responding to COVID-19 and this pandemic. All right, so again, very similar to the last EASES program. It can be used for staffing. It can be used for infection control and supplies, testing, learning support service, technology, PPE, and really any other support that directly benefits students. So this is quite a broad grant. There are, there are always restrictions. A couple of restrictions are you can't double dip. So you can't be reimbursing yourself for things that have already been reimbursed through other kinds of programs. And it can't be reimbursed for anything that is unrelated to the COVID-19 pandemic. But other than that, it's extremely broad. Now, the process for receiving these funds is very similar to what we did in the spring. It operates just like EASES-I. So you fill out a standard contract form for the full amount. So we're essentially entering into a contract with each of the 76 agencies for the full amount of the award. And then you will fill out an invoice. We've supplied a template. It's right there on that website for the reimbursement amount, whatever you need to be reimbursed for. It could be for the full amount if you have costs to cover. It could be for part of the amount if you only have part of the cost to cover. And you send both of those to our new email address, asesgrants@mass.gov. And I monitor that. Nina has access, and Megan Evans, who is on my team, also has access to that, and we'll be processing it and answering any questions that you have. As I said, you could send us multiple invoices, so send any subsequent invoices to that same inbox. The funds themselves are good for the FY22, for fiscal year 22. So from July 1st to June 30th. I think that's it for EASES-II. So both of those forms, the standard contract form and the invoice template, are both on the website there. And last time you for EASES-I, there was one more thing that people had to fill out, and that was the CASEL, the contract authorized signatory listing. That does not need to be filled out because you just filled that out just a couple months ago. So I think we have all of those, unless something drastically has changed, and you've got new people signing for your financial bills, invoices, etc. We wouldn't need the CASEL. If something major has changed, we would need a new CASEL.
Matt, I have a trivia question for you.
Trivia, oh boy.
All right, ready for it? ESA stands for?
Emergency Assistance to Approved Special Education Schools.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yes, that is, I believe that's also on the website. All right, very cool. So that's EASES-II. As I said, fairly straightforward. ESA's Workforce is more involved. So I'm going to walk us through the ESA's Workforce program. Again, federal funding. Okay, so few more strings attached, few more things to fill out. It's $79 million. The amount of each allocation was based on the increase of approximately 14% above the current price per student per school. And it was using the higher of either, we used the higher enrollment. So we gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. It was the higher of either the number of students most recently approved by DESE or the actual enrollment of students as provided to DESE on November 23rd from MAPS. I think you did kind of a census. So that was how we arrived at those dollar figures. Oh, Nina, this is your slide. You want to talk about in cases where you need to submit a Form 1. So
to avoid unintended consequences, I just want to remind everybody about the Form 1. The link is there. There are 3 areas for Form 1 notification, and Form 1 is the actual notification or request for prior approval of a substantial change within an approved special education school. So there are 3 types. One is immediate notification, one is 15 days prior notification, and then one is prior approval from the department. So the 2 significant requirements for this grant that apply to this grant are the 2 Form 1 requirements and prior notification for each 20% increase in enrollment. So if whatever your approved DESE enrollment currently is, if you are approaching the 20% over, you want to obtain prior approval, and that just simply is done through Form 1. And then the other one is to add, eliminate, or change staff positions. So this grant is to make the programs whole again because of the expensive costs of COVID and everything that the programs have been through. So we want you to retain, use the money to retain and recruit and new staff, keep current staff. But if you do want to change or eliminate positions or add positions, you can still do that. You just need to do it through prior approval through a Form 1. So if those are needs of your program, again, just reach out to your liaison. They'll be happy to assist you. And the other Form 1 requirements are still in place, but these 2 actually apply to this particular grant. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay. The purpose of ESA's Workforce was to strengthen and stabilize the workforce, again, sort of specifically related to staff providing direct care, education services, related services directly to students. So these are the frontline workers providing services directly to students. So you can use 90% of your allocation for the costs related to recruiting more people, hiring them, retaining those staff. Those eligible staff are defined as, again, providing ed services, direct care directly to students with disabilities in both day and res programs. So frontline workers who regularly provide direct care. This is who this is geared towards. Um, so, you can use it for all kinds of workforce kinds of expenditures, really, right? So anything that began on or after July 1st of this year, we're talking about recruitment and retention incentives, salary increases. So like the difference between, say, a new starting salary and what an old starting salary would have been. You're hiring a new person, instead of hiring them at 55, you're hiring them at 75, something like that. You could use this for that $20,000 bump. You could use it for overtime. I think we want to be reasonable with that, provided it's incurred on a limited basis while you're trying to get more people and try to make yourselves whole on the workforce front. So it could be used for overtime as well. And we're really hoping that this provides you with that extra money to hire more people and to keep the workforce that you have. So I said you can use 90% of this allocation for those kinds of things. You could use 100% if you want. We are saying that you may, if you wish, use up to 10% of it for actually very similar things to what EASES-II pays for, right? COVID response supplies, services, technology, PPE, and other kinds of supports. But there's and at least 90% of it has to be spent on the workforce, retention, recruitment kinds of activities. So the following are not eligible under this grant. So compensation, bonuses, incentives, benefits for any other types of pay or any other types of payments for your highly compensated employees. So any kind of executive management, administrators, and individuals who don't regularly provide direct care to students, they would not be eligible under this grant. This is really for your frontline employees. And again, they can't be used to reimburse expenses that have already been reimbursed through other state or federal programs. And it can't be used for anything unrelated to the pandemic. So similar process, although there is one more item here that you're going to have to fill out, and it's a grant workbook. So it's the same kind of deal. The funding mechanism that we're using is a contract again. So this DESE is basically entering into a contract with each of the 76 agencies. So you'll have to fill out the EASES-Workforce standard contract form for the amount listed, for the full amount that you're allocated. And then you'll fill out an invoice template. And the first invoice template, there's a little bit of a rule here, for no more than 70% of the full allocation. So we're basically allowing you to invoice us for the first invoice 70% of your allocation first, and then we will reassess later on in the year as to the final 30%. And then you'll have to fill out a grant workbook, and I'm going to do a tour and a whole walkthrough of this grant workbook so you know how to fill it out. And then you would send all three again to that ACES grants mailbox. We're asking for all of these by February 1st. That's what we're hoping to get these all processed by then. But we do know that there may be subsequent invoices later, but at least getting the standard contract, the grant workbook, and the first invoice in by February 1st would be is the time limit or timeline we're setting on this. And again, these funds are going to be good July 1st through June 30th, all of FY22. So let me stop sharing this now, and I am going to provide you with the grant workbook so you can see how this works for ESA's Workforce. Okay. Fairly standard low-tech kind of a grant workbook here. There are 4 tabs along the bottom. You're going to have to fill out each tab. Each tab asks for separate information. The first tab is just a sort of an introduction, and where you select your agency from the drop-down menu. And so you see everything in the drop-down here, and hope someone doesn't mind at Crystal Springs, but I just randomly selected you. You put in the name of your executive director, you put in your email address and your phone number, your contact information there. And then there's, just to read this attestation, you're confirming the following, and there's sort of a long list of attestation and a few terms of agreement that you need to be aware of. So please read those. I think that, you know, they're just to head any questions off at the pass regarding the, you know, some of the legalese of ARPA. As long as you're following, I think the good message here, as long as you're following what is in the grant description that we put out, you're going to be fine. We made sure on our end that everything that we put in this grant package met the requirements of ARPA. So as long as you stick to what is in the grant and what is in that grant notice and are following the rules of that, you should be good. Okay, so that is the first tab. The second tab is simply enrollment, and we're asking for that enrollment as of November 19th. And it's all the students in your agency. You can see it populates up here at the top, so you'll know on each tab that, you know, I've chosen the right if I'm at Crystal Springs. How many students broken down by the following categories: the number of out-of-state students, the number of in-state students that are private pay, the number of in-state students that are 100% district pay, the number of in-state students that are 100% agency pay, and then sort of those cost shares. How many students are cost share? And this could be a district state agency cost share or a district private cost share, any kind of cost share arrangement. Student would go in here, and that should, in theory, be your total enrollment. All these categories will add up to your total enrollment as of November 19th. All right, so that's the enrollment tab. Pretty simple thus far. This is staffing. So because this is a workforce grant, we're collecting information on where the workforce challenges are for you. So this is where we're collecting basically the number of FTEs you have and the number of vacancies you have, and we're going to be able to track this over time to make sure that this is working and the money is going to what we said it's going to. Along the left, you'll see all the UFR codes. So UFR 101 through UFR 138. Well, several in there skipped. And then in these columns, you'll need to fill out the following: the total FTEs you have employed as of December 1st, including any employees that you have on leave. So this is total who is employed, whether they're at work or on leave. The next column is your total employees who are on leave. We've heard from a number of you that there are a lot of people on FMLA, PFMLA, workers comp, etc. So this is where you would put in, okay, I've got this many employees who are on leave. Those are the first two columns. The third column is how many vacancies do you have by FTE. So your total FTE vacancies as of December 1st, again by each of these UFR codes. And then for those people who are employed, the average annual pay, not including overtime, as of 12/1. So what's the average that they're making? Again, all by UFR code. So that is the staffing tab. Again, it's by agency. It is not by, it's not by individual program. It is by agency. The last tab is the budget tab. This is where you're going to give us an indication of how you are going to spend your money. So along the left, we have line items that are related to recruitment and retention. And then, we did say that 10% could be spent on other. We also recognize that, going to the columns here, that we're right in the middle of a fiscal year. So there will be some, and you may have already, done some signing bonuses, done some overtime, increased some salaries. So there will be room here to reimburse for something that you've already started from July 1 to November 30. And then there is a column here for what you estimate spending from December 1st to June 30th. And then a brief description of what you have done and what you're currently going to do. This doesn't have to be paragraphs long description, just to give us a sense of that you've got some kind of we are increasing our starting salaries for all of these kinds of positions, and that would be your brief description. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and creativity here. So we've pre-populated, as you can see here, increased starting salaries, signing bonuses, and then we've just put an other category because we figure that you're going to be able to come up with all kinds of different ways to recruit and retain. So there are a couple of other categories here. In terms of retention, salary increases, as I mentioned before, overtime, and then other. And here's where that other non-workforce related, and it can't be more than 10% of the allocation. And if you do more than 10% of the allocation, this box will turn red on you.
Matt,
so
I'm sorry, I have one question on this one. If people are putting in costs for temporary staff, where would that line go? Like for arbor services or like an agency that they're filling in for, would be other, under other?
So I guess it would be workforce related. So I wouldn't put it under other non-workforce. It's not exactly recruitment. It's not exactly retention. I would choose one of those and then write a brief description. That's exactly why those others are there. So let's say that's a placeholder for allowing us to continue to recruit. Maybe you put it in other incentives for recruitment of eligible staff and write in your brief description here, temp, agency, etc.
Perfect. Thank you.
I think that's how I would handle that. So this is it. I mean, right? This is the grant application itself. Once you get into the invoice, you'll essentially what you'll do is you'll copy what you put in your budget into the invoice template that you'll see on the website. And I think I probably even have a copy of it here that I can show you. Why don't I do that? just so that you see what the invoice looks like, right? So anything highlighted in blue, that's on you to fill in. So your letterhead, you're billing us, the bill from, your agency's legal name. Our accounts payable team will only pay bills out to the legal name of your entity. If you have any questions about the vendor code, there were very few questions about vendor code under EASES-I, but if you do have a question about it, we've got a list of all of your vendor codes that we can help you out with. But your legal name has to be on this invoice. And then, so you can see it's basically exactly copy and paste from what you put in your budget into this invoice. All the stuff goes in here. And then your total allocation amount goes here, and your invoice request, again, this is that 70%. For your first invoice, it can't be more than 70% of that total allocation. So your invoice request, what we're going to pay, is going to be in this line, and so it can't be more than 70% of that total allocation. Then you just sign it and send it off again to that acesgrants@mass.gov email address, and we will process it. We're going to try to process these in an expedited manner, really as quickly as we can. So happy to do that for you. We know that this is urgent. So that was the tour of the application. Just to give you a sense of what's going to happen down the road for ESA's Workforce. So we will be doing a small data collection at the midway point, probably around April 1st. And at that point, we'll see, we'll see if the agencies, if you demonstrate need for the final 30%, we imagine that most everyone will. And then you'll be able to invoice us for the final 30%. That data collection is going to look just like tabs 2 and 3 in your grant workbook. So we'll collect student enrollment again, see where we are in terms of students, because the goal is, more staff means you can have more students into the programs. And we'll also be collecting that staffing tab again to see where we are in terms of retention and recruitment. There will also be a final data collection in the summer, and we're going to be wanting that to come into us by the, sometime in July. And we'd like that in by August 1st or so. I think August 1st is a Monday. I already went over that. So I think we're at the point where we can do some questions and answers. Nina and Jen.
Yes, excellent. So we've had some repeats, and I've answered some privately. So one of the questions is about, are these funds a one-time allocation for this year, or did they become our new base tuition rate? So the answer there is, this is a grant right now. MAPS does have an initiative working with the legislature to request for these funds for another year. And they are working also on a long-term solution. So this is not a tuition change. This is a grant allocation at this time. However, there is a plan to continue to work collaboratively.
Right.
Matt,
so
this one?
the only,
yep,
yeah, the only thing that's right in stone now and happening now that we know are these grant programs and everything else. Lots of things could happen, but there are discussions that are ongoing.
Exactly. Matt, this one's for you. If a school has a day program and a residential program, they're entering all of their data as one agency, correct? So
Correct.
They're collaborating and adding up all their student enrollment, all of their FTEs, their total FTEs, their vacancies. So usually in program reviews and mid-cycles, you would do this by program. For this application, you are doing it by your entire agency. So hopefully that will answer that question. This one, can retention be applied across the board, meaning all eligible staff will receive an increase of some sort, or does retention need to have a more targeted approach? So again, except for those high cost salaries that are excluded, you could do an across the board retention bonus or whatever you want to call it for all of your staff.
Right, that is totally up to you.
Okay. Somebody's asking if you can review the, somebody's asking about cooks. Cooks would be considered direct care staff, and staff who are cleaning the houses. Anybody who's providing a direct service related to the students would be considered direct care staff.
Yep.
Somebody's asking if you could just briefly review the allocation amount again for the workforce grant.
Oh, the allocation, like how we got to
how what they're allowed to spend the 70-30, oh sorry, the 90-10. Just that briefly.
Okay. So okay, so 90% of this workforce grant is used for recruitment, retention of just the folks Nina was talking about, those direct care staff, you know, the non-executive level staff that are providing students direct care. 10% of it can be used for sort of the non-workforce kinds of things. So supplies, services, technology, PPE.
Excellent. This one is actually included in the application. So this person's talking about the number of staff who are on leave. So I know that in speaking with some of you, I remember speaking with somebody last week, they have 36 staff in their direct care residential on either a family medical leave or a paid leave or workman's comp. So that, that is accounted for in the worksheet that Matt reviewed. So you're going to go over, you're going to submit your full FTEs for your agency and then your vacancies, and then the number of vacancies, including your people who are on leave. So those are accounted for. But that's a great question and really, really important because that is going to affect the data. I mean, so the overall goal is to, as Matt talked about in the beginning, is to stabilize your programs. Obviously, your programs are well needed throughout the Commonwealth for the students that we all serve, and to increase the retention, the recruitment and the retention. So the numbers, we're hoping that the vacancies will decrease and that the student enrollment will increase. Those are the two goals of this grant, so that we can continue to serve and provide the best services to the students who need, have the highest needs. Somebody is asking what type of documentation they should keep to prove their workbook data, if any.
Bill, do you want to take that one? Our CFO, Bill Bell, is
hi everybody.
in the house.
Can you repeat the question, Nina?
Sure.
I don't think I quite understood it.
So they want to know what documentation, if any, do they need to keep for their proof of their expenses?
Well, I would think there would be some reason, there would be some information at the school level, at the program level, of the basis for the cost. So, you know, I would recommend you retain the, you know, if it's in the 10% category, sort of what you're charging off from the PPE, supplies, ancillary side of the house, and obviously you're going to have some file that's going to build up to the expenditures around personnel. So whatever those files are that are the basis for the claim, you should keep those on hand. I did address, I think, I responded to a couple of questions, or at least one question, and I think there's a similar one here. This program, we're working in partnership with the Executive Office for Administration and Finance. The source of the funds come through the American Rescue Plan and the direct state and local relief funding that came from the United States Treasury. I put the CFDA number back into the chat. It's 21.027. So and we are treating, there was a question as it related to the uniform guidance single audit threshold. Even though we keep talking about grant funds, we're treating these funds from the state perspective as the schools and programs of beneficiaries, not traditional subrecipients receiving a federal grant. And as such, we're not viewing these funds as counting towards the single audit threshold.
Great. There's a question on the staffing tab. Are we completing FTEs for the entire organization or just the approved special education school? That is a percentage of our total business. So this grant is for your approved special education day or residential program. So you would not be completing it for your organization. You'd only be completing it for the part of your organization that is actually approved by the Department of Education. Okay, will payroll taxes, health insurance, workers' comp, disability, and other employee benefits costs be eligible for this grant? Bill, I would think that those are other expenses, or Matt, do you want to just confirm that though? Because it would have a direct effect on the school's ability to retain the people, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think our view of it is, those are accompanying employee compensation related costs.
Yeah.
So yes, short
Okay.
answer is yes. Obviously, we're hoping the thrust of, where we, the state, are listening to what you folks have been saying, that you need more funding, you need to be able to increase salary offers, you need additional working capital to hire and retain people. So our goal is that you can hire and retain people to deliver the services that our public education community needs to acquire from you all. So, we're giving you reasonably broad discretion here to do what you need to do to meet the service needs for your personnel.
Excellent. What circumstances might be eligible for an extension based on the language from the payment terms and conditions? So I think that we talked about there might be individual circumstances that may require an extension, but the overall goal and hope is that schools will be able to use these funds before June 30th. And if there are extenuating circumstances, we would deal with those on an individual basis. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, this question, if we initiated salary increases related to recruitment and retention in FY21, can we include those individuals as an allowable amount in the FY22 budget worksheet? So it's anything from July 1st, 2022.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to take that one back. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, technically this grant is just this fiscal year. But when you calculate what the increase was, that's one I'm not sure I hadn't thought about that. And so
yeah, we can talk about it and get back.
I think we should get back to that one.
This question is, what is the process for adjusting the initial allocation based on the proportion of out-of-state students? So the initial proportion of the 70% allocation was actually based on, as Matt said, your total enrollment, which was either the enrollment of students that you reported in November or to MAPS that they shared with us, or your approved DESE enrollment, and it was based on all students. The student enrollment data that we'll be collecting as part of the application, once the group is able to look at the overall numbers, the 30% determination will then be made for the 30% allocation, whether it's going to continue to be for all students or whether there will be a slight change. So that hasn't been determined, but the 70% is based on your total student enrollment. So we wanted to give everybody the most flexibility we could and the most amount of grant money that they could receive. Let's see, we just have a couple more questions here because we're running out of time. This talks about for programs with one-to-one aides that are funded by OSD, how is that factored into the average pay? And are those funds eligible to apply for one-to-one aide compensation? So the average pay, it would be whatever line item, whatever UFR position they are. Usually there are 134, 5, or 6. And that would just, they would be factored into the average pay there for that UFR line item. And yes, they would be eligible for compensation because they are providing a direct service to students. So hopefully that is answered.
Right, and this fund, these funds would be sort of on top of what they're already making through OSD. So if you wanted to give them the $10,000 raise, whatever, then that's where this money would come in.
Okay. This keeps coming up. What happens after the grant funding is over, when we've increased salaries, but there is no longer grant money to support it? So that goes back to the what we've discussed, that there is, this money is allocated and confirmed for until June 30th, and there is a plan. Nothing has been confirmed yet, but we are hopeful that there will be another one-year grant. That MAPS is working with the legislature to ask for those funds. They've made it clear that those funds are needed to provide these services. All of the state agencies are in support of the need to continue to support your programs because we know that there is a high need for these students. We get calls just like all of you about students who are not able to be placed, who are in emergency rooms for months on end, not getting services. And we know that you all want to provide the services, but that you're having a very difficult time staffing, just like a lot of other industries. So right now, the money goes through June 30th, but hopefully before that point, you would hear from MAPS that there is additional grant for next year. And then MAPS would be working with some of the state agencies and the legislature for a long-term plan. That is the overall goal that we've discussed. Again, nothing's been solidified, but that is the plan. Would costs of advertising be eligible for grant funds? Yes, they would. That would be other expenses. And let's see, I'm just trying to see if there are any other, there are some financial questions which we can take offline about very specific codes and things that I think would be more confusing for most people. And let's see. Last question I'm going to address is, how do we account for the shortage of one-to-ones who are not reflected in our budget? And you could just add that as a note on the side if you have a lot of one-to-ones, because those are paid for by the district. So you should be getting paid by the district. So, but again, if you're not able to provide that service, then that would be a challenge, obviously, and that student wouldn't be getting their services. So we would have to probably just address that separately. So we did not include the one-to-ones in the allocation. And then the last question, is this going to affect the annual July rate increase with the cost of the inflation? Should we expect a rate freeze because of the grant? I don't believe that that's been addressed yet by OSD. Usually they provide plenty of notice. So that would be coming closer closer to the end of the fiscal year, but hopefully this money will be used and help to recruit and retain staff. So Bill, Janelle, Matt, if any final words before we leave? We'll be sharing this with everybody, the PowerPoint with everybody. There are email addresses for people who have questions. You know how to reach Matt, you know how to reach me. Some people know how to reach Bill. And
I'm in the phone
Janelle.
book.
So any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're really happy that we're able to provide this support, and again, appreciate the interagency collaboration that that we receive from the other state agencies. So thank you all. And any final thoughts or words, Matt or Bill, before we head off?
We're monitoring that inbox, and so you know, if you have any questions, let us know. But hopefully this was helpful and gave you pretty concretely what needs to be done in order for us to process these and get these moving for you.
All right, everybody, be well. Take care. Good job. All right. See you soon.